Thank you all very much. I am Rachel Doherty, Director of Department of Learning and Development, and it is my pleasure to introduce this morning's keynote speaker. Coming to us from St. Pete, Dr. Kimberly Macuare is the co-director of Innovation Labs at the Dali Museum and the Director of Education there. She's an experienced educator, curriculum designer, and facilitator. For over 20 years, she has designed world-class learning experiences, college courses, workshops, leadership retreats, team building sessions, and keynote presentations, and most recently has been responsible for the award-winning curriculum of creativity and innovation workshops and offerings at the Innovation Labs at the Dali. In her role at the Dali, she has helped a wide range of organizations, from local nonprofits, CASA and Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, to educational institutions like the University of South Florida and Florida Poly, to Fortune 100 companies such as Bank of America and IBM, to build their innovative capacities and developing creativity-focused mindsets and learning key creative problem-solving skills. She has extensive experience in arts-based creativity training and is a certified trainer of leading research-based creativity and innovation tools, foresight mindset, and toolset, as well as a certified facilitator of Lego Serious Play. She also teaches a creativity course in the College of Business at the University of South Florida. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kimberly Macuare.
I think the thing that's most on my mind when I hear Rachel's kind introduction is how close I am to changing the over 20 years to 30. Yeah, almost 30 years in the education business. And I was especially pleased to be able to come and speak with you today because as a former, I used to say recovering academic, but as of recently, I relapsed, and so I'm back on the academic train. But I am always just as excited to show up on a college campus as I was as that 18-year-old first-generation college student who showed up at the University of Cincinnati, not knowing what to expect. But it's been quite a ride. So thanks for having me today. And let's see if I can manage to figure out how to work this clicker. Sometimes when I am asked to give a presentation, despite the fact that the Innovation Labs has been operating for almost a decade, and I've been doing this work for more than 7 years, innovation isn't the first thing that comes to people's minds when they see a painting or when they look at a sculpture. Customarily, when people think about innovation, they're more likely to consider things like a smartphone or a technology such as 3D printing, or of course, the now ubiquitous artificial intelligence. But there really is a uniting factor that brings together those art objects and the things that we think of more normally when we consider the word innovation. And I certainly can see that innovation is at the heart of what you do. Just from the awards that were given today, those innovative pedagogies. And as a former medievalist, I'd love to talk to you about your course, by the way, sir. The programs, the facilities. And what is at the heart of innovation? Well, I could tell you, but as all the best professors know, what's better than telling people? Showing them. So everybody should have on the far side of the row, there's a Dali bag. It's on this side of every row, so this poor gentleman's gonna have to run down to the end and grab it. I'm sorry. And what I'd like for you to do is, there's a couple of things in this bag, but I'm only going to ask you to take one right now. So there are some black velvet pouches in there. So I'd like for everybody to grab one black velvet pouch and just pass it to the right, or left, sorry, I'm very directionally challenged, especially looking at you. And maybe somebody could be nice to the cool kids in the back who don't have a row. I wouldn't want anybody to be without the Lego bricks that I hear a few people heard about, and I don't want anybody not to get the Lego they were promised. So does everybody have a pouch? Excellent. So everyone should have these 6 bricks in their pouch. And I just want you to take them out. You might need to be careful. These ducks have to fly back west to Tampa, so we don't fall on the floor. And I am going to give you 30 seconds and a very simple instruction. And I just want you to follow it to the best of your ability. 1, 2, 3, build a duck. Build a duck. Okay, it's about half your time. Five seconds. And time. Okay, I'd like to have everybody hold up their ducks. No duck shame here. Hold those ducks up. Delay the J. Delay judgment. And I'm gonna pop down here because I wanna see these ducks also. And I want to have you look around. I want you to look at the ducks next to you. Look at the ducks behind you. Yeah, I hear some duck judgment. Some people think some ducks look better than others. They look duckier. Now, looking around at those ducks, is there anything that you notice as you're looking around at everyone's ducks? No duck judgment. Delay the J. That's the first rule of creativity, is to delay a judgment. I heard somebody.
All of them are different.
All of the ducks are different. And we probably have about 150 people in here. I've done this with 5 people. I've done it with 50. I've done it with 250. And it never fails that all the ducks are different. And why is that? We see things differently because at the heart of what is different, we're thinking about a painting or a sculpture versus a smartphone or a 3D printer. But at the heart of all of those innovations, whether they be artistic, whether they be scientific, whether they be social, at the heart of every innovation is creativity. And creativity is about seeing things differently, doing things differently, and ultimately being differently. Now, I went one slide too far. Now, I was thinking about this talk when I took a little walk through our special exhibition because, as we'll think about throughout this presentation all of the things that feed creativity. In my case, at least, one of the things that doesn't feed creativity is sitting at my desk. I never get my best ideas sitting at my desk, right? My desk is my operational place, my functional place, answering emails, writing reports. So when I need inspiration, I take a walk through the gallery. And right now we have on an exhibition called The Subversive Eye, Surrealist and Experimental Photography. And as I was walking through the exhibition, I was looking at what in the 30s and 40s, especially starting in the 1930s, the latest photo I have on here is in 1940, exhibition full of groundbreaking, innovative photographic techniques, including solarization, overlay or superimposing of images, and multiple exposures. And it got me to thinking that back at my desk, I could queue up Photoshop, and with a keystroke or two, I could now create a reasonable facsimile of any of those images. But at their heart, they wouldn't be creative. So I often tell my students, the created is not the creative. What I'm doing is I'm repeating a template. But what animated the photos of the surrealist was the creative spark. It's not the button that I can push now to copy the effect. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is that creative spark that we use as professors in order to create learning experiences that are meaningful for our students, and the creative spark for our students so they can do work that's meaningful to them, and so when they leave this institution, they not only are able to find meaningful, well-paying work, but they're able to create innovations that will impact not only this region, but, you know, in best case scenario, maybe impact the world for the better. And we know that this is an absolute imperative right now. If you look at almost any list, I don't know how many of you keep up with World Economic Forum, they always are publishing lists of job skills. And creative thinking is the fastest rising skill for a student. It's not any kind of content. It's not any kind of so-called hard skill that's the fastest rising. It is creative thinking, because that's exactly the kind of thinking that students need in a time where we are really experiencing, everybody's always saying unprecedented, right? It's kind of like in The Princess Bride when they're like, I don't think you know what that word means. But really unprecedented, monumental change that we're going through. And we know from looking at some of the most recent HR data collected by ATD that 83% of organizations feel that they are not equipped with the skills for creative, innovative work. So the most important skill, something that's absolutely imperative to doing innovative work, and 83% of businesses, organizations have a skills gap. I don't see that as a problem. I see that as an opportunity. I think that that's an opportunity for us to stop waiting for these mythical people that we think are going to come to us fully formed in their creative selves, and to realize we're the people we're looking for. We are the people that we're looking for. We are those creative people. Our students are those creative people. I think all we need is a little nudge to move in the direction of that creative thinking. And of course, artists have thought about creativity a lot. Yeah, that's what kind of makes looking at art, I mean, innovation always benefits from looking in unexpected places. looking in unexpected corners. But one of the things that art provides is a discipline and a group of practitioners who've given a lot of thought to what it means to be creative. You know, in the business world, where I do most of my work, it's really only in the past 20, 25 years that companies have thought about themselves as being creative, as being places where creativity thrives. Artists have been thinking about it for a lot longer than that. And so I thought we might turn to that most creative of artists, Salvador Dali, who very handily wrote us a guide on how to access our creative genius, the 50 Secrets of Magic Craftsmanship. And of course, I only have an hour, so 50 secrets might be more than you're prepared to deal with at this time of the morning. But also, maybe the way that Dali expresses things isn't always the most accessible. So, for example, one of Dali's secrets for creative genius is to fall asleep with a key in your hand, suspended over a metal plate, so that when you fall asleep, the key hits the plate, wakes you up, and you can capture the hypnagogic images in your mind and be able to use those for fodder. Not a bad idea, hypnagogic image. It's actually got some science behind it. However, perhaps not something that we're going to be going home to practice today. Or one of Dali's secrets for creativity is marry a woman named Gala. You know, that'll hook you right up. Again, not sure what my husband would think about that if I go off and marry a woman named Gala. Not sure what your SOs would think about it, but maybe not accessible for all of us. Or, of course, Dali's command that we all go out and study the sea urchin, because the sea urchin is a perfect symbol of divinity and an understanding of how the world works. All very interesting. But I thought maybe I would break it down. Having read Dali's 50 Secrets, I thought maybe I would break this down for you into the secrets that can be extrapolated from what he says instead of following him word by word. So I'm here today to share with you 5 secrets. It's pretty modest, right? From 50 to 5. 5 secrets of the creative process. Secret number 1, setting the scene. You must prepare the ground for creativity. So I'm going to be honest, of the 5 secrets that I'm going to share, this is the least sexy of all of them. And it's the one that people so rarely want to hear. And that is because, as Dali shares, the surer and more devoid of surprises are your means, the more astonishing miracles you will realize. Paradoxically, the more routine the things you do, the more amazing the results are. And this is something that Dali realized at a very young age. If you look at his autobiography, he has this fun little snippet where he shares that at the age of 12, this was his morning routine. I don't know how many 12-year-olds y'all know, but 10 o'clock in the morning, awakening, varied exhibitionism, aesthetic breakfast before Ramon Pichot's impressionistic paintings, hot coffee and milk poured down my chest before leaving for the studio, 11 to 12:30, pictorial inventions, reinvention of impressionism, reaffirmation and rebirth of my aesthetic megalomania. That is a packed hour and a half. But even given Dali's penchant for hyperbolic statement, his penchant for ritual was even stronger. And it's something that lasted his whole life. There was a life profile done of him some years later in the 40s when he was in Virginia, staying at the estate of Caress Crosby. And one thing that the Life reporter noted was how regimented Dali's day was. He would wake up at the same time. He would get dressed in the same outfit. He would have certain time set aside for his painting. He would have other time set aside for his writing. And the secret ultimately is that if you want to paint, you have to paint. If you want to write, you have to write. And not sporadically, and not squeezed into, the couple of times a year when you have some free time, but you have to make it a daily practice. And it doesn't matter what your endeavor is. If it's artistic, that's great. But if your area of innovation is in technology, or it's in science, or it's in law enforcement, you have to make the time for creative thinking. How many of you have a creative ritual? Time that you set aside daily, or maybe at least weekly, for creative practice? I don't see a lot of hands, I see a few. It's not easy, because most of the time we view creative thinking, because creative thinking is not problem-first thinking, right? Creative thinking is not always directional. Oh, I have this problem and now I have to solve it. Creative thinking is when you let your mind wander, when you let connections surface, when you're not doing anything that can be specifically defined as productive. Every day when Dali went into the studio to paint in the morning, was he painting a masterpiece every day? Absolutely not. Most of what he painted was crap. Yeah, probably better looking crap than any of us could produce because of his level of craftsmanship, but crap nonetheless. But it was in the daily practice of his art that he was able to reach the level of being able to produce the masterpiece. And so one of the things that I think we can do for ourselves, and really importantly, one of the things that I think we can do for our students, is get them in touch with their own creative ritual. How many times have they thought about, when are they most creative? When is really important. Please don't talk to me at 5 a.m. Yeah, I'm not there yet. But for some people, that is when they're feeling most creative. Where? I already said my desk is not my place. Where's your place? What are you doing? These are questions that you can ask your students and help them establish that ritual. I'm sure all of you have that one student who thinks that they're going to write the great American novel. And then you ask them, well, do you write? No. But I will. Now, if you want to do the thing, you have to do the thing. So establish your creative ritual. Secret number 2 on the cloud game. Recognize that seeing is a generative act. I think all too many of us, and especially when I go to talk at different universities and I speak with college students, tend to think of seeing as a very passive activity and not really understand the inventive potential that resides in seeing. Now for this, I'm going to ask, does everybody have something to write with? Everybody they have something to write with, a pen or a pencil? And if you don't have something to write on, I can actually help you with that. If you've got your own paper, that's great. If not, in my magic bag that I handed over to you, there's postcards that we're going to be using later. But the great thing about the back of a postcard is that there's a blank space, so you can use that to write on. So if you could get out something to write with and something to write on, and if you need to use the postcard, grab the postcard. So for the people who don't have something to write with, is this the part where, as the professor, I get to castigate you for not coming to class prepared? So my guiding wisdom for this secret is Dali's quote, and this is, he rarely keeps this simple and this direct. To look is to invent. And I love the fact that you have a photography museum in this building, because I don't think that there's any clearer illustration of this truism than photography. The way that you frame the picture absolutely determines what is seen. And it's not the only thing that could be seen, but it is creating something from the act of seeing. And that's what I want to think about today. So Dali was tooling around the house one day, and he was thinking about Picasso. And he probably thought about Picasso more than was good for him, because Picasso was one of his rivals, kind of like one of those great sports rivals, like, you know, Gators Knowles. Of course, Dali thought that, you know, he was better than Picasso. Picasso thought he was better than Dali. But this day, Dali was interested in a piece of mail that Picasso had sent him. And so he's like going through all of his things looking for it. And he came across a postcard. And the postcard looked exactly like this, although this is Dali's own painting of that same postcard. And as soon as he came upon this, he's like, Picasso. And for most of you who are familiar with Picasso's work, that would not be very obvious from this picture. But it might be if I show it to you in the orientation that Dali came upon it. Yeah. Yeah. Now do you see the face? Yeah. Of course, Dali was experiencing that phenomenon, pareidolia, where, of course, our mind is capable of taking random, you know, sets of data, and depending on how they're arranged, we can interpret them in meaningful chunks. In this case, we're hardwired for faces, so it's very common for us to see faces in things, which is why you can find, you know, Jesus' face on a grilled cheese on eBay, yeah, because we see faces in things. And so I thought we might try this out. But I don't want to make you draw something like this. I think that's a heavy lift for right now. So I'm just going to have you draw. It can be a squiggle, it can be a curve, it can be just a line. I just want you to draw some kind of mark on your paper. Yeah? A spiral, a mark, a curve, a line, a curlicue. Whatever you want to draw on your paper. Okay. So I want you to look at that mark. Right now, it's just a mark, right? It is a curve, a line. Now I want you to look at these 3 quotes from Dali. And just read through them, and I want you to see which one resonates with you. Intelligence without ambition is a bird without wings. Liking money like I like it is nothing less than mysticism. Money is a glory. The thermometer of success is merely the jealousy of the malcontents. And Dali gives good quote. He really does. You know, he had a way with words. And most of these are translated, of course. English was like his 4th language. Now, I want you to look back at your mark. And I want you to use one of these quotes as inspiration for finishing a quick sketch starting from your mark. I want you basically to transform your mark into the beginning of an image based off of one of these quotes. So for example, if I had drawn a curve and one of these quotes mentioned the sun, I might finish by changing my curve into a circle and then filling in, you know, whatever. Little people on the beach and a palm tree here in Florida. So just take a minute, and I want you, it doesn't have to be elaborate. You're not going to have to show it to anyone, but I just want you to finish your sketch riffing off of one of the quotes. give people one more minute. Okay, was everybody able to take their mark and turn it into something else? Raise your hands if you were. Okay. How many people did the bird? There's an easy version of this activity that you can do with your students if you're interested in doing something kind of interesting as a new class opener. Has anybody here ever done squiggle birds? So instead of just asking people to make one mark, you just ask the students to make just like a bunch of squiggles, like without lifting their pen, all over the paper. And then they have to go back in and they have to create as many birds as they can using the squiggles as starting points. Just gets their mind moving in different ways. But what about number 2? How many people chose the money quote? Their mark was the start of a dollar sign or something, okay? And what about the thermometer? Okay. So all that I really asked you to do was something pretty incredible, and that was to use vision as a transformative act of creation. When you first made that mark, it had no significance, it had no meaning. But informed by another input, it transforms completely into the start of a new idea. And that's the power of seeing. And it's a power that artists understand probably better than almost any other profession. Secret number 3, and no, you're not misreading that, multiple perspectives on the value of collecting the dots. We'll talk about connecting in a little bit, but before you can connect, you have to collect. And for this one, if you haven't grabbed your postcard from the black Dali bag, I want everybody to grab a postcard. If you didn't use it for your paper, this is a picture of my favorite painting in the whole entire museum. And even though there's no substitute for seeing this painting in person, I hope that I can impart to you a little bit of why this painting is my favorite and what I think it has to offer us, not just visually, but at a much deeper and more meaningful level. Dali said, I want to perceive and understand the hidden powers and laws of things in order to have them in my power. And we're going to use that as our setup for thinking about collecting. So this is a close-up of the painting. This painting is called, it's got a very long title, so bear with me, and I'll see if I don't have to take a breath mid-title. Gala Contemplating the Mediterranean, which at 20 meters becomes a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, homage to Rothko. Okay, that's a lot, that's a lot. So, of course, as you can see in your postcard, and as I've given you here in the close-up, the first part of this title, Gala Contemplating the Mediterranean. Gala was Dali's wife and his muse, and we can see her here looking out of a window onto the blue of the Mediterranean. So, simple, simple. There's a little bit of a back-off shot here. And I didn't put the whole thing on here right at once because, of course, this whole painting is based in an elaborate visual illusion. How many people have been to the museum? So you've seen this painting? Yeah. It is quite the painting. So let's start with the subtitle. Homage to Rothko. Rothko, of course, was an abstract expressionist painter. And for the people who aren't necessarily art aficionados out there, all that means is that's fancy speak for the fact that Rothko was less interested in painting representational images of things, like people, places, objects, and he was more interested in abstract forms. And in his case, mostly squares and rectangles of pure color field paintings. Now, even though this painting is subtitled Homage to Rothko, do not let the word homage fool you. In typical Dali fashion, this was less an homage to Rothko than it was a take this, Rothko, because Dali was not a fan of abstract forms in art. He thought that they were something of a cop-out. But perverse individual that he was, there was one thing that Dali loved to do. And he actually loved to take abstract elements, whether they be Pollock's splatters or Rothko's color fields. He loved to take abstract elements and use them to create representational images, which is just incredibly perverse, but very, very Dali. So if we look at this entire painting, of course, and we take our Rothko, and let's just isolate one of the color fields. This entire painting is actually just a bunch of Rothkos stacked on top of each other in columns. Some of the color fields are very well demarcated, like the ones he uses to represent tile. Some of them are kind of fuzzy, like the ones in the sky, because they're supposed to represent fuzzy clouds. And then, of course, the ones on the walls, he hides the joins because he wants you to have the eye trick effect that you're looking at a real wall. But these are basically just a bunch of tiny Rothkos, one stacked on top of the other. But in true infomercial style, and of course, I don't think there's anyone alive or dead who would have loved an infomercial more than Dali. That's not all. This painting is the original BOGO painting. And I'm sure people who are sitting in the back, what do you see when you look at this screen? You can shout. It's okay. You don't have to be decorous. Abe Lincoln. What about people in the front? If you're in the front and you don't see it, take out your cell phones and point it at the screen. Yeah? It pops right in. Yeah, please. Here, yes, I am. I'm a teacher telling you, take out your cell phone. Take out your cell phone and use it in class. Dali himself, of course, didn't have a cell phone to do this, and so a lot of times people ask me, how did Dali paint this? He painted it by looking through binoculars backwards. So he could check his progress of how the painting was working at a second level. Yeah, I don't want to move until you have seen it, because if you haven't seen it, it's pretty mind-blowing, especially for 1976. Of course, a lot of artists copy the same effect today, but it's kind of like Photoshop. It's no longer creative, it's just created, because it's missing the imagination, it's missing the novelty, it's missing the life that the creative spark gives it. So this second painting, this 2-in-1 painting, the second part of this painting was inspired by Dali's reading of Scientific American. And in 1973, Scientific American published an article on facial recognition. And the scientist was positing how many pixels you would need in order to recognize a known face. And of course, they used presidents because, back in that time, we had money. And it had pictures on it. and most people recognize those pictures as being their presidents from times past. And Dali read the article because he was a huge fan of Scientific American, and he read how many pixels it would take, and he said, okay, let's try it. And that is what led him to create this painting. Because what he understood, because he had a very excellent sense of morphological correspondence, was that Rothko's color field was indistinguishable from a pixel. And that if he just used Rothko's color fields as pixels, he could create two different images. One, when you were standing close to it, which would work with your fine vision processing in order to allow you to see his wife standing in front of a window. And one, if you were 20 meters away, when your fine vision processing doesn't work anymore, would allow you to use your coarse vision processing to see the bundles of pixels as creating the face of Abraham Lincoln, which he thought was another BOGO because 1976, of course, was the bicentennial. And so he's like, hey, happy birthday, America, have a president. And when I started out this section, I said, this section is about collecting the dots. And that brings me to something that Steve Jobs said. And Steve Jobs said, sometimes I feel guilty when people say that I'm creative, because all I do is connect things. And I think he was being a little bit disingenuous. But I think what he left out of that explanation is you can't connect things that you don't have. You can only connect what you collect. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think some of our students make, and I see this when they go into the workplace and when they come to me for workshops, is they think that specializing and going deep into one content area is going to outfit them to be an innovator. Whatever their discipline, marketing, finance, and so they read marketing journals, and they go to marketing conferences, and they set their Google alerts for marketing, and they talk to other marketing professionals. And that gives them a deep content expertise. And that is necessary for innovation. Because if you don't have deep content expertise, you can't recognize a good idea when you see it. However, the other secret ingredient to innovation is that innovation doesn't come by just going deep, it comes by going deep and wide. So you have to collect dots across a spectrum. Just like Dali, what in the heck is an artist doing, a Spanish artist doing, creating a painting for the United States bicentennial based on an article that he read in Scientific American? It is not very sensible. But it's precisely the fact that it's not very sensible that makes it so innovative. And it's precisely the way that Jobs saw that it wasn't the tech that was important, it was how people felt about the tech, and especially how people responded to its aesthetics that would make it successful or not. Which, of course, when he originally said that, people are like, what? If it does cool things, people will love it. And he's like, nah. People have to love it before they can admire the cool things that it does. So collect your dots, like Dali, the bicentennial, pixels, his wife, facial recognition, Mark Rothko, Abraham Lincoln. That's a wide variety of dots, and that's precisely what allowed him to create the masterpiece that is the Lincoln Gala painting. And of course, I wouldn't let you go without secret number 4, which is if you've got the dots, you collected them, now you get to connect them. And one of the things that I would say is that we don't want to just connect the dots in any old way. We want to connect the dots in meaningful ways. And one of the ways that we want to do that is by practicing radical juxtaposition. Dali really despaired of how boring people really were And that's really kind of what set him up for the object that I'm going to show you for this secret. I cannot understand why human beings should be so little individualized, why they should behave with such great collective uniformity. You know, said by a man who walked around with a pet ocelot, drove a Rolls Royce filled to the brim with cauliflower, and gave a lecture on the subconscious in a full diving suit and almost died because the helmet got stuck. So there's good reasons why people do things so little individualized, yes? Now, it is the start of your spring planning period, and so I thought I would not want to leave you without a pop quiz. I'm going to do it to you before you do it to your students. So we're just going to play a quick game of connections. So if this secret is about connect the dots, then let's play a game about connections. I am going to say a word, and I just want you to shout out again. Don't be decorous. You're a very decorous group. Shout out the first thing that comes into your mind. Okay? Are you ready? First word, salt. Okay. Next word, table. Love it. Next word, day. Y'all went rogue on table. I love that. Ooh. But salt and day worked out how I thought they would. Customarily, people have normal pairs, normal connections, normal correspondences when they think. It's how the brain works. It's how the brain's organized, right? On adjacency. I was trained as a medievalist, so somebody says 1066. First thing my brain does is make, the most logical connection that, I'm going to make. Not everybody will make that, though. And as we just talked about with Lincoln Gala, that most logical connection, that most adjacent connection is not the one that's going to lead you to innovation. You don't want the adjacent connection. You want the, wow, those two things? As evidenced in one of Dali's most famous art objects, the lobster telephone. This is when he was experimenting with an art style he called the surrealist object. And of course, he writes about this in his autobiography, and he says, why don't all the things that could happen ever happen? Why is life so boring? Why are all bathtubs rectangular? Why do trains stay on the tracks? Why don't sometimes buses drive off of the street into a toy store window so that the little kids can go in and take the toys? And he ends this really long diatribe by saying, why when I'm in a restaurant and I order a lobster am I never served a cooked telephone? Yeah. And of course, like all of us are like, health laws? I don't know, of course there's lots of good reasons why when you order a lobster you're not served a cooked telephone. But the lobster telephone is supposed to embody something for Dali. It's supposed to embody that when you take two things that absolutely don't belong together and you bring them into juxtaposition, it makes people think. It makes them wonder. It brings up a sense of curiosity, and that is at the heart of any innovative effort. If you're not piquing people's interest, if you're not sparking curiosity, then you're not going to get people to be creative. So encourage your students to make those radical juxtapositions. Just like the squiggle birds, another fun activity that I would recommend. I didn't plan on sharing any of this, but now I'm like, wow, you're my people. One of the activities I love to do, it just gets students in a more creative mindset, is you can tell them, guess what? You can break them into teams. It's a good, I don't like the word energizer, but energizer. You're all in teams now. Guess what? No matter where you thought you worked, you all got fired. Now you work for Disney. Yeah, Disney's right down the road. They're very familiar with Disney's brand, right? You all work for Disney. Guess what? Disney's moving into a new line of products and services. They're moving into funeral services and products. You have 10 minutes to come up with Disney's next product or service in their funeral line. Give it a name, who it's the audience, what problem is it solving, who's going to buy it, how are you going to market it. You'd be amazed at the things that they come up with. And if that's too macabre for you, you can do something a little bit like LinkedIn and alcoholic beverages. Yeah, or NFL cleaning products. And the magic happens when you take two things that don't belong together. The ideas that they come up with are so creative, so inventive. It will absolutely astound you, and it will prepare them for doing more creative work. And finally, the last secret. Secret number 5. Cultivate curiosity. Questions, questions, questions. If you understand a painting beforehand, you might as well not paint it. When I used to teach literature and writing, I would tell my students the same thing about essays. They never bought it. They all thought they had to understand exactly what they thought before they started writing anything. And I'm like, ooh, you're misunderstanding the purpose of the essay. Go back to Montaigne. Yeah? The essay is about trying to understand, not about understanding. As is painting, as is creating technology, as is engaging in any activity that you do. So I just want you to take a quick look at this. I left that up there for 10 seconds because that is the mode time that people look at a piece of art in an art museum. We call it the gallery shuffle. I just see people rolling around the gallery. 10 seconds. I'm going to put this back up there. I want you to kind of, in your head, think about what you remember from the image that you just saw. I'm going to put it up there for a more confrontational amount of time, which is 1 minute. You think I'm off by saying that, but I put it on for 1 minute, and like around the 30-second mark, I start getting like the hostage eyes from people because they, they're like, "Wow, it hasn't been a minute yet? Are you kidding me?" I didn't want you to think I was lying to you. So without looking at it, again, I just wanted to ask you 2 questions. The first is, how many people saw something this time that they did not see the first time? Okay. And what was that? Anybody want to just mention a couple of things? What did you see that you didn't see the first time? Water? Shadows? Something? Okay, looked like a person there. Maybe you didn't see it the first time. Second question, how many people changed their mind about something they thought they saw the first time? But on second glance, it was something else. Okay. So just looking longer actually improves people's ability to observe, understand, really see. But you can actually supercharge that power in people by taking that extended observational period and connecting it to questions. And there's a real great payoff for it. So this model is something called the ladder of inference. Anybody ever seen this before, the ladder of inference? A couple people? So the ladder of inference posits that all of us are sharing the same pool of observable reality at any given moment. Like right now, we're all sharing the same pool of observable reality. However, the observations that we're making are not necessarily the same, right? Like right now, very simply, I can imagine from physical positionality, I'm seeing things that you can't see, right? Just because I'm standing here and you're sitting there and vice versa. What are some other things that might affect the observations people make? Distance, their experiences, in all of the, we could break that down into like many categories. You know, simple physical things like eyesight. Sometimes before, like, you know, I was too vain to wear my glasses and hadn't had my eyes corrected. You know, when I was younger, like a teenager, and people would say, "Did you see that?" I'm like, "No." To more internal things, like my generation might cause me to look at something differently than somebody of a different generation. So we're all making observations, and from those observations, we're selecting data, adding meaning, making assumptions, drawing conclusions, adopting beliefs, and taking actions. And the way I said that makes it sound like it's a long process. It is not a long process. I want you to think about an email that you may have received from a boss, or a colleague, or a student, or an SO, an email or a text. And there was some ambiguity in the meaning. How quickly did you move up the ladder of inference to the worst possible interpretation of the message? You know, this jump up the ladder happens in seconds. We see something, automatically, boom, I know what kind of person you are, and now I'm going to judge you for it. Boom, of course, you're angry with me, and I'm about to get fired, so when I go into that meeting, I'm going to be defensive. People move up this ladder very quickly. And what you can do by uniting extended observation and questions is you can keep people low on the ladder of inference. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to help people to defer judgment and to tolerate ambiguity. And those are two things that are absolutely crucial for getting students and getting ourselves to do more creative work. And tolerating ambiguity is probably the hardest skill to impart. And so this is a technique that we use in the museum that works really well for this, and it's now moved into medical schools, business organizations, and others. So for this, I'm actually going to come out, and I'm going to need some people to participate with me. So I'm going to step out of the role of the speaker, and I'm going to step into the role of the facilitator of this technique, which is called Visual Thinking Strategies, or VTS. Please take a moment to look at this image. And I'm going to assign a job to each half of this room. This half, I want you to pay attention to what questions I ask during this process. This half of the room, I want you to give some thought to how I respond to people when they make comments. Okay? Okay, let's start. What's going on in this picture? What's going on in this picture? And you can raise your hand. I'll come to you.
Want me to stand?
Do what moves you. You want to stand? Stand.
Well, it looks like it's a lovely, otherworldly type of place. But for some reason, people are walking up that staircase and jumping into that pit.
Okay, so you're looking at this image and you're thinking about the setting and you're thinking that this could be some kind of otherworldly place. And then you're also noticing that there are figures in the painting. And you're thinking that some of these figures seem to be going up what could be a staircase. And you're thinking that they might be jumping into a pit. What do you see that makes you say jumping into a pit?
At the very top of the staircase, there seems to be maybe somebody taking a leap or something. I can't really tell what that is.
Okay, so looking back at the image, you're noticing that there seems to be something, you're thinking maybe a figure here at the edge that seems to be taking a leap, and that's what makes you think that people might be jumping into a pit. Or they could be jumping across it. What more can we find? What more can we find?
Some of the movements from the people on the staircase look like they're like dancing, like there's some elegant movement.
Okay, so you're coming back to these figures on what could be a staircase, and now you're thinking about what action these figures might be engaged in, and you're thinking that from their body positions that they could be dancing. Okay, what more can we find?
It almost looks like a love story in a way where like they're connected and they're kind of building their relationship, and then maybe this is a family member. Looks like a horse, like they're going off to war or having to leave that connection and what they built in some way.
Okay, here what you're thinking about is not only the figures and their action, but you're thinking about what kind of narrative or theme this might represent. And you're looking at the figures and you're thinking that perhaps there is some kind of narrative about figures being in love, and then perhaps about these figures having to leave that connection behind. What do you see that makes you use the word love?
Just embracing, dancing, enjoying themselves, the connection that the two figures kind of had.
Okay, so you're coming back to the figures and you're noticing that there seems to be some embracing, some dancing, and to you that signifies connection and could indicate that these figures are in love. Okay, what more can we find?
I think it's a leap of faith.
Okay, so you're coming back to what somebody's mentioned before and thinking that is there some kind of jump going on here? And you're thinking that this could be some kind of leap of faith.
Yes.
And what do you see that makes you say faith?
In the foreground, there are images that are signifying stopping or ceasing or not moving forward, whereas the images that are ascending are moving up to the top to make a leap of faith.
Okay, so you're noticing that these figures, perhaps for you, are not all the same, and you're thinking that the figures down here are kind of stopping, not going to be in movement as these figures are, and that the ones that have ascended what could be a staircase unlike these figures, are ready to take some kind of leap that could be a leap of faith. Okay? What more can we find?
I'm thinking it's almost like a time at the beach in a way, and there's all different activities, and everybody's just having a great time and just happy, period. And I say the beach because to me that looks almost like the ocean in the back and the playground, but they're all adults, and they're all having a great time.
So here you're coming back to the setting, and you're thinking that to you, this reminds you of the beach, and you're thinking that perhaps there could be some water, and even though all of these figures are adults, you're thinking that at the beach there is kind of a recreational vibe, and you think that all of these figures could be having fun. Okay. I saw a hand over here. I'll take one more comment, and then I'm going to get you out of here on time.
So it would seem by the staircase, or whatever you want to call that, and if you were to lay it on its side, it's like a puzzle piece that would actually fall toward that ground area there, yeah. So in a way, they might be celebrating this excavation of what could be some sort of stairway to heaven. You know, Led Zeppelin.
So you're coming back here to the image, and you're drawing our attention to what has been described by some of the other speakers as potentially being a staircase, and you're thinking that it looks almost like it could fit in what appears like it could be a divot here, and that perhaps this was some kind of excavation, and these people are celebrating the excavation of what could be some kind of archaeological find. Could be a stairway to heaven. Okay. So I will step back into the role of speaker to finish this out. So that's VTS very quickly. I asked this side to pay attention to the questions that I asked, and before I show them up here, I'm going to quiz you. I asked 3 questions, one of them just once, and a couple of them I repeated. What was the first question that I asked to get people started off? What's going on in this picture? Second question. What more can you find? What else? Yeah, what more can you find? And then when somebody said something interpretive, what do you see that makes you say that? So what's going on in this picture? Why is what's going on in this picture a better question than what do you see? If you ask what do you see, most people will just give you a laundry list of unrelated objects that they see, but if you say what's going on, then they start using that critical thinking in order to create some kind of meaning for what they're looking at. Which, if we go back to the ladder of inference, is what they're doing anyway. But you're not surfacing it. And so they're thinking it, and they're just going along their merry way thinking it without being able to surface various perspectives and various opinions that reside within the room about what they're seeing. 2, what do you see that makes you say that? Why might that be a beneficial question for keeping people low on the ladder of inference? Yeah, because you're bringing them back. Like if you, always when people see things, they see something, they make their mind, and then they're moving on. But if you're bringing their focus back to what they originally saw, it gives them the opportunity not just to reinforce what they said, but it also gives them the opportunity to second think, especially given something somebody else might have said, and to think about something again. And finally, what more can you find? Why do you think that might be a beneficial question? There's more. And if you want people to tolerate ambiguity, you have to acclimate them to the fact that there's always more. Because they're going to be super tempted to think that what they said is the answer. is the narrative. And then on this side, real quick, I asked you to pay attention to how I responded to people. So when people made a comment, what did I do after they made a comment? I repeated what they said, and what kind of language did I repeat it in? Yeah, it was neutral, and I heard somebody else say conditional. So you want to give a neutral conditional response, because as soon as the teacher or as the meeting leader or as the other thing, somebody says something and you want to generate lots of possibilities and you're like, yes, oh my God, that's amazing. You know, then like the other kid who was thinking something completely different is like, and so kind of repeating back to people, making sure you understood what they heard and putting it into a context. So you're thinking about the relationships between the figures, and you're thinking that they could be da-da. As soon as you make it conditional, it opens up the space for other people to give conflicting perspectives. So that's it. 5 secrets. Prepare the ground for creativity, unsexy as it might be. The best creativity emerges from having a ritual. Practice generative looking. You're not too old to play the cloud game. And while it might seem to be a distraction or a waste of time, playing the cloud game is actually priming your brain to make those kinds of connections when you're looking at other, more important data. Widen your possibility space by collecting dots in areas that are not yours, because then your brain's going to do that magic thing it does, which is connect those two things. And the farther afield they are, the more possibility you have for it being something innovative. Practice radical juxtaposition. Bring those things into connection, and the farther apart they are, the better. And cultivate curiosity with thinking routines. Ask questions to supercharge students' extended looking. And I'll end by bringing it back to where I started, which is the connection between art and innovation. And I'd like to end by quoting Jonathan Feinberg, who's an amazing art critic. And he's also started, just recently, in the last couple of years, a PhD program in innovation. So art and innovation do go together, like peanut butter and jelly. And he suggests that art exercises the ability of the brain. And this is just looking at art. Imagine, we haven't even talked about creating it, but looking at it. Exercises the ability of the brain to perceive and creatively adapt to new realities, which is a fundamental survival skill. Looking at art is an analog to creative problem solving. Because when you look at a piece of art, what you're trying to do is solve the problem of what you're looking at. And that kind of mental exercise provides an amazing training ground for students who then can move on to apply those same thinking patterns and those same mindsets and tool sets to bigger innovation problems in their areas of expertise. Thank you.